that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
We were surrounded. We landed in the middle of them. We had our hands full. Just right in the middle of the battle there, we had lots of people got wounded that day. Many got killed and everything.
When we flew in the Chinooks, we hardly ever landed. They would come in, and it was like this helicopter comes in, and it's got the nose up and the tail down, and you're just squirting out the back end.
I heard this, and you never wanted to hear this, and I heard it the first night I was in country, Gooks online, and that simply means that you have enemy soldiers that are online and they're coming.
We was out there for 5 days of the 7 I had left, and we never found his body. He got killed that first night.
We do not want an expanding struggle with consequences that no one can foresee.
Vietnam, a blazing fire in the slow burn of the Cold War. It was there that America fought its longest war of the 20th century and faced the dilemmas that came with its superpower status.
But we will not surrender, and we will not retreat.
The young men that fought there are now well into their 60s, mostly retired, many of them grandpas. Their war in Vietnam is often portrayed as a loaded gun of cliches, colored through the lens of Hollywood. Tainted by politics and unachieved objectives, Vietnam echoes across 5 decades. In bookstores, America's best-selling wars have their own sections, yet Vietnam, the war that has most impacted the country's psyche, does not. However, the public is finally taking notice of Vietnam veterans and honoring their service. And so, I've decided to tell my community's Vietnam story through the words of the people who lived through it. Located between Chicago and St. Louis, Decatur, Illinois, and its surrounding towns comprise just over 100,000 people. Distinctly Midwestern, with a waning industrial base, it's a community where American flags fly from porches and front yard flagpoles.
It was a patriotic town. It was like every town at that time.
For over 10 years, Vietnam and America's war there was reported in the headlines of the local paper. Though half a world away, the war came home as hundreds of its young men left for military service.
We've made our big yard at Decatur one of the most modern anywhere.
You knew your neighbors, you played with the neighbor kids, you played kick the can, you rode your bike around.
Decatur was just that. It was conservative. It was not a small town, but yet it was a mid-sized town.
Probably cruising up and down El Dorado if you had any money for gas.
Cruising El Dorado Street, Sandy's to Sandy's. Yeah. Where the Hardee's is on West El Dorado to where the chicken place and everything is on East El Dorado is Sandy's to Sandy's. And with the stop in at Elam's in the middle.
If we're going to grow big and stay strong.
Decatur was an industrial town in its 50s and 60s, had the industries, oh my gosh, I don't know, 20, 25 industries. And most of my friends, their fathers and their dads and grandpas had come through employment in these industries since they were children.
My dad was a blue-collar worker. He worked at Mississippi Valley.
My brothers, both my brothers, my brother-in-law, my dad, and I was marked for Caterpillar. And I was coming out, and I was, going to go to Caterpillar. And that's exactly what I did. Within, 3 weeks after I got out of high school, I went to Caterpillar.
Graduated on a Friday night, and Monday morning I came in and went to work. I was right out there in the shop working, and we knew it was coming. My mom called and talked to me there at lunch hour and said, "You got your notice."
The darn thing came, big old envelope, 8.5 by 11. Greetings from the President of the United States.
May 21st, I just said, I bet you that letter is in the mail. It's such a gloomy day, and sure enough, I got home, there was that letter.
I was working in an apprenticeship at Caterpillar and was drafted right out of the apprenticeship. And when they call, you go.
Participating in the ritual of answering their country's call, like generations of Decatur men who came before them, these four left the platform of the Wabash Depot for service in Vietnam.
I just remember it was a cold and miserable morning, and everybody was anxious, scared, didn't know what was going to happen.
We stopped along, I think it was, we picked a few up in Taylorville, Hamel, Litchfield, was it?
Could be.
It seemed like to me we picked up some in Litchfield.
Yep, around there you could see the arch starting to come up.
It was starting to come together.
Yeah, it's starting to come up there.
Excited.
Yep.
Big long line lined up, and everybody counted off by fives. So they got done counting off, and they said, well, everybody's number 5, step forward. They stepped forward, and they said, you are now a Marine.
Ooh.
I was a number 4.
Oh, wow.
Joined by their wives, they recall the emotions from that November morning 49 years ago.
We just thought he was going to go to Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, and that would be fine. We could do that. But he called me and said, I'm on my way to California. I'm a Marine.
I went home and cried a lot that day, and a lot of other days.
That's all you do is cry.
Yeah, you cry and cry and cry.
It's terrible, especially with your brother and husband going.
Yeah,
that is
same time.
Double whammy, isn't it? Really,
it would be awful.
When Vietnam actually got really going and the draft and everything, not everybody got drafted. I mean, I enlisted, my buddy enlisted, so it wasn't everybody just running off and all that. Oh, I enlisted in my senior year in high school. I wanted to be a Marine.
I am not sure exactly when I wanted to join the Marine Corps. I know it became very strong my senior year.
I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I went a year and then decided not to go back and ended up enlisting in the Army, U.S. Army.
I think it was right after I was notified by the draft, I enlisted.
5 of us went in together, and 4 of us came back. One didn't. Got my letter and said a few choice words, but then I went back up to Chicago for my induction physical, and from there they loaded us on a train and down. I took my basic at Fort Knox, and then of course from Fort Knox to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and then from there to Vietnam.
And we got on this bus, and he was taking us to Cu Chi. I never paid any attention. He was driving the bus. We were all getting on with our bags and everything. And I go to the back of the bus, because I had a big, long seat in the back, and there was nobody back there. I thought, man, I get back here, I can throw all my crap in there. And I looked up, and here's a buddy of mine from Decatur. And it was Dick Seitz. Dick was driving the bus. And I jumped up, and I said, geez. And I said, Dick. And he looked, and he said, Jimmy, so what?
They blew up the ammo dump. So wonder what more it was in for then. So first night in country. So
It's kind of been a while, but then I put the primer back in, and as soon as they got the round in and the powder charge in, close and lock the breech and wait for him to tell me to fire.
I wish I'd have said something. I had a chance to, but I was too shy. And I'll be approaching here in about 5 seconds. I owe this guy $5, and he left before I ever got a chance to pay him. Here I come right now. There I am. I was 24 at the time.
I was second lieutenant, first lieutenant, so, like one of you said, that's privates of the officer corps. So I was 23 years old, and they give you roughly 40 guys and send you over to combat zone and say, you're supposed to take care of them. Well, it wakes you up a little bit that, you're somehow kind of responsible for these people,
I'd go out at night, and when the sun come up, you couldn't use the dogs, so you'd come back into the base and then wait till dark, and some of us used to say when it got dark you went hunting.
A 122 rocket had a direct hit on my bunker, and you could feel it shudder. And we waited and waited to die, and it was a dud.
And so I kept asking him, can you see my brain? Can you see my brain? And finally he said, Sarge, You didn't have any brains before you got shot. You don't have any now either. We all carried a compressed bandage for if you ever got really hurt. That was what you used. So he took mine off and patched my head. And then he did something I'll never forget. He took his own bandage right in the middle of that fight. And that bandage was important because it was your life, kind of like it was your lifeline. Metaphorically, it was a lifeline. But he used his bandage to then bandage my shoulder.
I remember distinctly kind of looking around and think, dang, everybody's hitting the ground. Well, I better hit the ground too, you know. And they weren't hitting the ground because you were supposed to hit the ground. They were hitting the ground because they got wounded or killed. From a prone position, I put all the suppressive fire I had on, because then we could see from muzzle flashes, you know, where the bunkers were, and I lit them up.
An hour and a half into the battle, I was behind a tree, and a sniper opened up on me. Whether it was the initial round or one of the rounds, went through my upper thigh, and I found myself out from behind my tree.
I stepped on a landmine, and it was just a Coke can, little Coke can, you know, and because they got the C out of my leg.
We took them gifts at Christmas time with soap and candy, and there were 100 kids, 150 kids, something like that, and 6 nuns and a priest. And the VC found out about it, and they came in and slaughtered them all.
And you could see people. There was 4 or 5 people down there, and of course, the other guy that was with me had to call somebody to see if we engage him or not. But we never got any answer, so we started shooting. And the Army to send a squad out to bring them back up the next day. One of them looked just like the guy that cut my hair the day before. Couldn't tell one from the other most of the time. Kind of like the people that what they're going through with in Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff.
The passing of time puts the next generation of America's servicemen on the front lines of new wars.
Our morale was more towards like, we've made it this far, let's not do anything stupid to get anybody else killed. We're 4 months away from being completely out of Iraq as the Army in general, so let's not screw it up now, you know.
Vietnam veterans are perhaps best suited to understand their experiences, particularly if those serving are their own sons.
You know, when we were over there, you know, if I got him on the phone, then I could ask him certain questions and he'd tell me, you know, where, you know, mom didn't know about it, the wife didn't know about it, you know, just something him and I could connect on because we'd both been there.
Compelled by the news of radical anti-war protest, one Decatur serviceman wrote a letter to the editor from the battlefields of Vietnam.
We are laying ourselves on the line, and they are back home and telling us what a bad person we are.
Decatur didn't experience much of the dissent and turmoil regarding the Vietnam War that occurred in other parts of the country, although there were a few controversies. The local college, Millikin University, did organize a small, yet vocal and visible, anti-war protest. However, in 1969, dialogue about the war emerged from an unlikely event that seemed just as much about free expression as it did patriotism.
Patriotic images of an American art, I thought, let's get it. For the first week or so that the show was being displayed, no one did anything.
Flag in Chains, a piece created by Mark Morrell, a nationally recognized artist, drew condemnation from the Macon County Sheriff and various veterans organizations.
I think it was foam,
foam plastic.
And it wasn't the American, he made the American flag. He did the American flag. He painted, on material, didn't he, honey?
It didn't stay up too many days. I think
they got it.
The sheriff took it.
They took it.
Charges were filed by the state's attorney against Professor Klaven for violating Illinois state law regarding the display of the American flag. In the weeks before the trial, supporters and detractors of Flag in Chains passionately invoked Vietnam into their arguments.
The doors opened up, and I heard, "There they are!" And then the next day, we got the paper, and there was a picture of us, and I just felt like we were the Rosen for being tried for treason.
This case gave them opportunities that you don't get very often. But I don't know. I wouldn't know what the opportunities were. This was one of those things where it could go to the Supreme Court.
I was the only NCO in the room. I still don't know why I was there, and they were talking about kill ratios and so on, and later on in the paper and all, I'm thinking, they say 10 to 1 or something. It was more like 4 to 1 or something. I don't know what the ratio is anymore, or something like that. But I always figured that they looked better in print than they actually were.
They were never going to let us win the war. We could have walked across Vietnam with all the troops we had over there. We could have walked across from one side to the other.
I had a little gal, she gave me a hug when I left, and she told me, she said, "G.I., she said, I miss you very, very much, you leave." And and it's, it just tears your heart out. Because, you were there and you protected them, and now you're leaving.
As the Vietnam War dragged on, statistics became the boy down the street, a classmate a few rows over. Tragedies given a face dozens of times.
If they didn't want the school named after him, then they picked another name. So I don't know if Mike was the first name or the last name. But my mother she said, okay, name the school after him, but name each room after another one. And they said they're not going to have that many rooms because too many got killed.
From 1960 to 1972, 45 of Decatur's sons fell in Vietnam.
Finally, one day he come to his mother and said, "I have a present for you, Mother." Said, "I'm enlisting in the Army."
He'd already did it.
Yeah, so that was his passion.
He always wanted to go in.
With Vietnam going on, and he felt that he needed to serve his country in that way. He's the kind of kid that he's going to give everything he had, no matter what.
He lettered for all 4 years in football. He just made up his mind he was going to enlist because he didn't want the draft to bother him every time he turned around to get another letter. Well, I knew what he was getting into because I'd been there before, but. He was old enough to make up his own mind, and that's what he wanted to do, and he's going to finish when he got out of service again, going to finish school.
Well, he wasn't going to get promoted really anymore. If you're Green Beret and a major, you're kind of topped out.
Yeah. You're not expected to live.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the attrition.
Things we read and such, yeah, he knew it was a mess when they got there, and they had to. He was the only one really left to fix what they could at the time. So they got the hill and got those big machine guns off of them for a little while anyway. But
how long those burdens must be carried. There's survivor's guilt. There's just anguish from the death of someone dying in your arms, dying next to you. And just the fact of killing the enemy. And we think, that's a natural thing to do. It's not.
In a way, these boys can forget what they went through over there.
Well, our claim to fame is we came back.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I said, I did my job, I came home. Wouldn't trade them for anything and wouldn't repeat them for anything.
You live every day now for what you got. Be thankful for what you got and what you came through.